it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I have set a timer. If any of you read my newsletter, then you've probably heard me talk about my new 10-minute timer evangelism. This is my timer, and it's what keeps me on track. I've been doing a thing since last year, actually. One of the problems with being a working creative is that part of the work is the work itself, and then part of the work is promoting the work. And while you're promoting the work, you tend to exit the process of the work. And it can be very hard. I mean, I'm sure you know this if you're a person who tries to find time for your creative endeavors, that if you don't make the time to do it, it becomes this bigger and bigger obstacle in your head. It's just like, it's this thing that I have to do. Preparing to like draft a manuscript was starting to feel like a really big chore, which is dumb because I like the writing part. So I actually got the idea for the productivity timer from my son, who has a little Montessori timer thing that's like, here's how to understand the concept of time. And it turns out that I too needed to understand the concept of time. So it's wonderful. Anyway, I have set a timer, which means we have a limited amount of time because I always have a limited amount of time. And here we are. The main things I wanted to show you are the Dreamland arc. Ooh, I will say, and I said the same thing to my editor, at this stage of my career, I don't really get excited by arcs. You may have noticed that it's been literal years since I last posted like an ooh, unboxing arcs kind of video. And that's because, you know, arcs are cool, but they're not the final book and they all kind of look the same. And it's like, all right, it's an arc. And I already know that there's like some errors in there that I fixed and it's not important to me. But this is the first time that I was seeing like what the book was going to look like. As you can see, the cover is a little bit metallic. It's got this sort of matte, like, it's got a very interesting holographic effect going on, which is unusual. And it's also unusual for me to see sort of what the final product of the book is going to look like. That's kind of in the imagination of the cover designer. And so yeah, this one was really exciting to open, and my editor was like, it's really expensive, so don't get used to this. So we won't get used to it, except for the fact that the final product will probably look something like this, plus a sprayed edge, plus illustrated end papers. So the end pages are being illustrated by Pole Arts. Poe is fantastic, as you know. She did the interior art and end pages for January's and Gifted and Talented, and the incredible, like all-time fave end pages for Masters of Death. You know who Poe is. So that is incredible news, and they're really great, just incredible gothic images. I love it so much. They're really hot also. I knew Poe would be good at that. In case you're wondering, like, hey, Olivie, why aren't you working with Little Camera? We'll get back to that. I've been making the joke that Dreamland is kind of like Me Before You, except instead of becoming a companion to a disabled man, she's a companion to a man who's possessed by a demon. Obviously, it's actually nothing like Me Before You, but I have to have little jokes or it is hard for me to promote things. So yeah, this book is about Anya, who is an aspiring actress. She's 22, she's super ambitious. I really wanted Anya to be this borderline psychopath. Like, she wants to achieve what she wants to achieve so badly that she does not care how she gets there. The ethics of how she arrives at her dream are not important to her. And she kind of becomes embedded in this, you know, villa in the Hollywood Hills and this very wealthy family and the man that she is a companion to who has problems. So there's a lot going on here. It's about the, you know, the relationship between an artist and their art. It's also about what are you willing to do to achieve your dreams. And it's also about the city of LA, which I love. And hopefully I can make you love it too. Okay, but back to Lil Camera. As you may already know, Lil Camera and I we collaborate. We are longtime collaborators. So Lil Camera, in case you didn't know this, we met through fandom. I wrote a fan fiction in the winter of 2016, January 2016, I started writing the fanfiction clean. And in April of 2016, Lil Kura created this incredibly original and breathtaking, very like watercolor-esque piece of fan art for the story. And it was so exactly what I had imagined, but what was so strange to me was that I don't consider myself to be someone who spends a lot of time crafting visuals. I'm not really in it to tell you how things look. So for her to really kind of capture what was inside my head was just astonishing. I remember I was at a bike race with Mr. Blake in Monterey, and I was like, look at this crazy thing that happened. And like, it was so exciting. She and I started, you know, the beautiful, beautiful process that happens in fan fiction where you're making art where humans are making art not for profit, where, you know, I would write a story and she would do some art, or she would do some art and it would inspire me to write a story. And so we have been working together that way for a long time. We created the web comic Clara and the Devil, which was based off my original short story Clara and the Devil. And now here she is, the graphic novel Clara and the Devil. So this is about the devil. He comes to Clara's small coastal town over the summer, and she is a college student who's working at the local library, and the devil wants a library card because the devil supports the local libraries. It's kind of crazy to consider the legwork of this story. I basically sat down and wrote the story Clara and the Devil in one afternoon because I wrote it as a birthday gift for my friend who you may know as Calabrina, otherwise known as Stacey Turner. We've had this tradition of writing stories for each other, and so Clara and the Devil was something I wrote for her. I thought she would like it. And I sat down, I wrote the whole story. I was like, whoa, crazy story, ha ha ha, I guess we're done. And then it turned into obviously the webcomic, and then Kimura wanted to expand the short story, and I was like, all right, I could be talked into that. So now Clara and the Devil as a series is about sort of the interplay between art and sin. There's more to it than that. I really wanted to play with the idea of the devil as this like morally, you know, neutral, completely neutral character. And it's more like his appearance in people's lives drives them to do these sort of things that they identify as temptations. But is the devil really doing it is kind of a question mark, right? And what is a sin really? There's kind of a, you know, in book one, there's this sort of different take on lust and sort of this interplay between lust and ambition and agency. And in series 2, which you probably saw the beginning of, but which is also getting brand new art, it's on its way. That one is about gluttony and sort of, again, creative ambition. And it was this really, really interesting way for me to tell these quite seductive stories about temptations and bargains and who is really at the heart of your choices and what does it really mean to sin. And anyway, it's here, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's absolutely gorgeous. I could not be happier. We've gotten blurbs from like amazing people. I'm so grateful. And anyway, that's why you haven't seen Lil Kimura's interior art in my stories. She's been very busy. You know, we're in good hands. I've always been very, very lucky with art, and I'm really happy. This comes out in the spring, which happens to be about 10 years after Lil Kimura first made that piece of art and first read my very first story that I ever posted. So 10 years. I'm holding up well, I think. Let's see, I've got some events coming up. I am doing an event at the Ripped Bodice for Kate Golden for Half City. So you can see me then in February. In March, actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this. I'm doing some stuff in March if you live in New York City or Chicago. And then I will also be at BookCon in April, and I'm doing a bunch of signings, and I'm doing a signing at the Bookish Box booth where we will be giving away Dreamland arcs. I will be signing them for you. There will also be an exclusive art print that I think is going to be really, really cool. So yeah, that's what's coming up. And okay, moving on. Someone was asking about the Atlas 6 adaptation, and I don't really know what I'm allowed to say, partially because there hasn't been like a big announcement like there was the first time, but also because I'm like deeply superstitious as a person, and film is a crazy industry. Film is like, things will be in the works forever. What's wild to me about the film industry is they'll be like, hey, like this team, they want to meet with you and here's some availability. And so I pick a time, right? And then we get up closer to that time and they're like, oh, you know what? Like, oh, they're not able to make it. They're in Aspen. So like, how's this date that's 2 months out? And you're like, what is this meeting even for? By the time you have the meeting, it's been like 6 months and it's just like, what are we talking about? So anyway, that's how sort of the pace of the film industry sometimes. All of which is to say, the Atlas series is in development. It is with a different producer, different showrunner, and different studio, but it does have all of those things: producer, showrunner, and studio. So theoretically, it will be a show. That's all I'm willing to say about it at this time. Okay, hi, could you please tell us more about the Untitled Assassin Wife project on your website? Okay, this is the book that I'm just starting. And actually, do I have okay. So last year I read this book called The Philosophy of the Home, Domestic Space and Happiness. It's basically about this idea of like, how do our domestic spaces, how does the home reflect who we are as a society? What does it reflect about our values? How is it some ways, you know, the home is essentially unchanged. There's a room for different activities, and what does that mean about the fact that we cannot sort of reimagine advancements in domestic life? I don't know. You'd have to read the book, which is translated from Italian. But the thing that stuck with me is that there's a chapter about love, and the author makes the argument that love is what makes us a modern society. We are a modern society because of the way we've built our, you know, our interior infrastructure on love. And it determins the way that we live and the way that our lives take shape. But at the same time, love has been the domain of women for so long that there's this sort of imbalance between how we conceive of love and how we conceive of work. The thing that really struck me that was, as a society, we experience love by experiencing falling in love. The romance genre, most things that have a subplot of romance are about the process of falling in love, falling back in love. Basically every trope is that sort of beginning period of like the meet cute and how we make things work, of course, but very rarely do experience love as what it actually is, which, you know, is a committed relationship that requires a lot of decision making and has its own sort of stages. And so after I read that, I was like, you know, they're right. Every time that I write a romance, I tend to have to focus on the aspect of falling in love, and almost never do we read about the act of staying in love. And so I wanted to write a book about a marriage. But I'm working with two different pieces of my own work here. I wanted something that is tonally like How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a fanfiction I wrote that is predominantly action adventure. So it's kind of a romp, and it's a complicated romp, and there are fight scenes all over the place. And it's basically a spy story. I'm at the point in my writing career where I have identified my comfort zone. I'm really good at people who just kind of talk to each other, talk to themselves, feel feelings. You know, that's my comfort zone. And I am a pantser, and I'm not necessarily interested in changing that, but I would like to push myself a little and try to do something that is a little bit pacier and something that has what other people identify as plot. I always think that I'm writing plot. What I'm always writing are stakes, and so now let's try something I think that has more of a forward motion. I think I'm probably not going to outline, but I do want it to feel episodic the way that my fan fictions were episodic, that it was like there's sort of an obstacle, we deal with it, we maybe also contend with, you know, this conversation we haven't had about our relationship or our marriage, and we move on to the next, you know, battle scene. So there's that, and then I also wanted to take pieces of Chaos Theory, which is the novella that's in January. So that is the newest piece, and it's basically about, you know, this is kind of a spoiler, but it's about a multiverse assassin. And so I really like the idea of a multiverse where there is a contract killer, and that's something that she just sort of does as a job. She works for a company that she refers to as the firm. She is a litigator, but there are partners. She has an ex-boyfriend from, you know, assassin school, assassin academy, he works for, his company has more of a municipal structure. They're called the town. And he's in public works. I'm having fun with this, but it's actually about her and her husband is not a spy. So I can already feel that this is going to be an uphill battle. That's like, I have to make people root for the marriage, even though they're in love in the beginning, they're in love in the middle, and they're in love in the end. I think ultimately it might turn out cozier than a lot of my other works, just because the like interior, the relationship itself is reliable. It's one of the things that was enjoyable about, say, the first season, because I haven't seen the second season, of Nobody Wants This, where there was external pressure, but internally the relationship was quite strong. And like, yes, they would have their obstacles, but they would, you know, there was this feeling at the end of each episode that like, these people love each other and they're going to be okay. So I want all of those elements to be there. Currently the book, the working title of the book is Mrs. Smith. Because I want to bring to mind Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but like really it's kind of about only the wife is the assassin. It's the Untitled Assassin Wife project. So even though it's about both characters, it's really, a lot of it is invoked by her and what she does for a living. And a lot of my work has been focused on corruption and oligarchy, so I think that is also going to be an element. I believe she lives in the Alphaverse in a biodome because she lives in a time, in a strand of the multiverse that has a lot of technology but no natural resources. So they are essentially using natural resources from other timelines. She's kind of a pirate on the side because, you know, the gig economy. That's Assassin Wife. You may have answered this before, but how have you managed the transition to original characters and worlds from fanfiction? It's just so easy to jump into a fanfic idea and know how these characters would react, but all the exercises I found online just feel so silly or fake, such as what is your OC's favorite pizza? Okay, so I always have to provide the caveat that I stopped writing fanfiction because I was going too far away from the source with my fanfiction. Like, people were pretty much complaining that the characters and worlds I was building were too different. And so definitely the malcontent in my comments was a good sign that I needed to build my own worlds. That being said, the first thing that you make that's not fanfiction is probably still gonna feel sort of fanfiction-esque. The first thing that I wrote was Masters of Death, which I like to say is the most fanfiction-y of all of my books because there's all these different pairings, they all have happily ever afters, the characters still sort of feel like shades of archetypes that you find in fanfiction. I think if you were to read Masters of Death and read, say, How to Win Friends and Influence People, you would see some very clear, I'm gonna call them fingerprints, which is to say that, you know, the first thing that you write when you're beginning to grow as an artist is always going to be a little bit derivative, I think. Creativity, people treat creativity like it's this lightning bolt of an idea that hits and all of a sudden you just put it on the page. But creativity is something you learn and it's something you develop because you can be more creative when you have more skills. So what's easy about fan fiction is not so much that it's really not so much that you understand who the character is, because while that is important, people definitely have disagreements on who the characters are and what is, you know, true to character. But what is easy, what definitely makes things easier, is that the audience already cares about the character. And that's really the thing that you have to focus on, is why does the audience care about these characters that you've created? And that could be, I think, first of all, is why do you care? What scenario are these characters in that makes you want to root for them, that makes you want good things for them? And that would come from first identifying what you like in other media. What tropes do you enjoy? Which is not to say that you use tropes as a framework necessarily, but it is a place to start. That's just like, okay, let's say I want to write a story about two exes that have to work together again. Why do we care about them? What is important about them? What aspects of their personality work together and which ones don't? Why would they have broken up in the first place? I mean, when you're building the story, there is really no like, you bring your own methodology to it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using a trope or a story concept or whatever that you might have used in fan fiction and just envisioning, why are these characters different and why should we care about them? You know, start small, write a short story first. And I just think you need to take the pressure off, like knowing that the first thing you write is probably not going to be the most original thing in the world. It probably isn't. And that's not a bad thing. You can take it there. You can figure out what you enjoy about the things that you enjoy. And I think, you know, for me, I often say character is the easy part for me. So I don't always know what advice to give because it's the thing that comes naturally, but it's the thing I most enjoy doing. So, you know, I think that there's going to be this sort of weird, blurry middle ground where you're writing characters that remind you of your fanfiction characters, but you've changed their backgrounds, you've given them different motivations, you're putting these two people together not because of how they would have worked together in a different source material, but because of what you want them to be. So yeah, just, you know, basically you're making a daydream. So just make it a good one. Okay, something I really love about your writing is that you incorporate religious language and imagery so beautifully. I'm curious how you're able to capture the inherent beauty and sacredness of these spaces while being so aware of the very real ways they harm people on a daily basis. As someone who's had some pretty shitty experiences with the American Christian church, it's so interesting for me to see your Catholic roots reflected in your work without it feeling negative or dismissive. I think a lot of people who distance themselves from their religious upbringing as adults, myself included, struggle to still find beauty in these spaces, especially when they're the reason for a lot of our pain. This is true. The thing is that first of all, I was Catholic, which I am Catholic. I don't know. I think I still identify as Catholic culturally. Like I carry with me the usual burdens of a person who was raised Catholic. And I don't think you ever get to just sort of like shove those off. But Catholicism is necessarily more liberal than Protestantism or non-denominational or anything that's just sort of a broader Christian, non-Catholic Christian, because Catholicism, thank you, Age of Exploration, many people of color are Catholic. So Catholicism is one of those things where like there is sort of I make a joke about it in Dreamland and probably in other things too, that there's like third world Catholicism. That's just like there's a sort of a blend of local or regional superstition that informs the way that the Catholicism is shaped. It's something that I actually read about. There was a New Yorker article about the new Pope and how he spent time in Peru, and there was this sort of attitude that like once you as a member of the Catholic Church went to a different region, you learned to blend more rather than enforce institutional norms, which is quite a, you know, modern idea. Naturally, it's the church wants to survive, so that's what it does. But not for nothing, that is, I think, a more effective way to reach people. And so my experience with Catholicism is that I had very liberal priests. One thing I do enjoy about being raised Catholic specifically is the emphasis on deeds, that you have, that part of engaging with God is acting for God and you know, do unto others as you would have done to you. And also the aesthetic. I mean, I think the real reason I can address religion in a sort of beautiful way, invoking the imagery, Catholicism is very like aesthetically pleasing. It's big on pomp and circumstance and theater. There's a lot of theater in Catholicism, so it's not that hard to lean on that and make that an aspect of when we're talking about beauty in a religious way, or talking about devotion and invoking this religious imagery. It's easy to do that with Catholicism because aesthetically, that's what we're working with. We're working with the money of the church and the sort of insistence on the feeling that God's love should overwhelm you. There should be stained glass. The church should be beautiful. You should be awed by God's love. which is very different from the Protestant doctrine. There are merits to both. But I think that that's the really direct answer. But it's also just that I don't feel that my relationship with the church was poisoned necessarily. The church did not bring me trauma. I disagree with I disagree with the motivation of institutional religion. I disagree with the hypocrisy of certain doctrines. But what really informs my relationship with my religion or my belief, is that when I was young, one of the big issues of my youth when I was being confirmed as Catholic, which is something you do in your teens, gay marriage was the big issue. You know, it was the big thing that everybody was talking about, whether it should be legalized or not. And I remember sitting down with my priest and I said, I cannot agree with the church on this. I cannot believe that there's anything wrong with love. Basically, I said, I cannot believe that God would turn, that God would not accept this, that God would make someone like this only to have them suffer for it. And the priest said, I can't remember the name of it now because I was a teenager, but it was basically an actual doctrine of basically informed dissent. And what the priest told me was that, if you have this area where you disagree with the church and you've prayed about it and you've talked to the leaders of your community about it and you have really researched it and put your whole heart into understanding why you feel this way and you still believe it, then God put that belief there. And that's what God wants you to believe. And so, so that was very freeing for me. It was something that not that faith is supposed to be this a la carte thing, but I think my understanding of faith and the thing that the reason that I enjoy theoretical physics and the reason that I tell people who enjoy philosophy that they might also love physics is because what physics, philosophy, and religion have in common is this ability to look at the world and wonder. The sense of awe, the sense of wonder. I mean, these are all people who looked at the stars and asked, why are we here? And so I think that is the operative faith that I'm talking about when I talk about religion. And that is that defining collective wonder is it's the string that I'm trying to pluck, the resonance that I'm going for is not necessarily that you have sat in a church and experienced the feeling of God dwarfing you, but that you have ever sat with yourself in your, internal space and thought, why am I here? And just been in awe of anything, of love, of relationships, of just the vastness of who we are and what we can do with our lives. And so I think that's what I'm tapping into. And I think it is a little bit more universal than religion. It is the concept of faith. And yeah, I hate all institutions. I think that Christianity is, you cannot remove the structure of the patriarchy from it. It collapses, right? So, but I think there is a difference between the structure, the bureaucracy, the work of religion, and the act and understanding of faith. But yeah, okay, I'm out of time. So, check my website for events. Yeah. And I think the light shifted in here, so this might be bad, whatever. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.